So anytime I post on like Instagram or TikTok about my centers, I get a lot of questions. So I was thinking I would do a long form video and post it on YouTube. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Kira and I am a teacher here in Atlanta, Georgia. I teach second grade. This is my second year doing second grade. Before that, I've taught pre-K, I've taught third, I've taught first, I was an interventionist, and now I'm a second grade teacher. So I have this little pad to help me keep track of like what I'm supposed to be talking about, to make sure that I hit like a lot of the questions that I get asked. So this video is focusing on centers, how I run my center stations. This is not perfect. This is not the only way that you can do it. I'm still adjusting, and I still adjust my centers. Like, this is not set in stone. This is just what works best for me. And if I see something that I need to change, I usually change it. So this is what works for me in my classroom, and I'm sharing with anybody else that's looking for ways to implement centers in their class. So I'm gonna start by just explaining how my centers work, and then I'll show you like how I store my centers and what's inside of them for this week. So I have 4 groups that rotate Monday through Thursday. So for reading, that's word work. Then we have desk work. Then they have technology, which is usually iStation, which is a district-wide thing. And then the back table, which is me for reading. It's guided reading. And then for math, I have math game, desk work, iStation Math, which is district-wide, which is technology on their Chromebooks, and then the back table, which is me. So when I say word work, this is usually focused on a phonics skill. In order for me to figure out like what each group is going to work on, I will use data from a screener that I've given my students at the beginning of the school year. I also use the information given back from the MAP test that they take 3 times a year. So we took it back in September, and I use that data as well to figure out what skills my students need to work on. I also use like what I'm seeing in my small groups. So that's how I decide what goes in my word work center for each group. I name my groups by animals, and it also, like, the animals stand for something. So llama is my low group. So this is a group that is still focusing on kindergarten and first grade standards. My monkeys are medium, so they're in between low and grade level. Giraffes are the group that's on grade level, and then alligators is all the way on the other side of my shelf. They are my advanced group, so they're like working on third grade skills. But how I figure out what's going in word work is always based on data. Sometimes my giraffes and alligators do the same thing, but most of the time this is differentiated amongst the groups too. And sometimes I even go a step further and differentiate within the group. And I'll explain that later when I show like what's inside of my centers. But word work is always working on either a phonics skill or, for my higher students, a grammar skill. As far as desk work goes, this too is usually differentiated most of the time. My desk work always focuses on the current standard or a standard we've already hit. For this week, it's not really focusing on our standard. Our standard is informational text. So I do have an informational text in most of these drawers. But I really just want my students to practice reading passages independently and going back in the passage to find their answers, because that's what they're assessed on a lot, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I want my students to have practice with that. So that's usually what's in my desk work. So like a passage, sometimes I attach a grammar page to the back of something we've been learning about. Sometimes we even do writing. But it's really just like passages, answering questions, going back into the passage, and focusing on the current skill if we can. If our current standard was finding the central message, if I can't find a passage, sometimes I'll even do task cards where they're reading short stories and answering those questions, or like point of view, there'll be task cards. So that's an option that can go in desk work as well. For math games, that's usually the current standard. So during math time, when the group is at math games, it's usually always the current standard. So an activity like something hands-on, or a standard that I need to reteach my students, so like spiral review. That's usually what it is. Sometimes for my high group, it's an advanced standard that I've worked with them at the back table, but always for the most part, math games focuses on the current standard, and it just gives them a fun hands-on way to practice that standard. Just like desk work for reading focuses on the current standard, so does desk work for math. So we're working on measurement. So the desk work activity that's in my drawer now, which I'll show you later, is focused on measurement. So I usually do about 3 pages, and they work on that during their math time. If they don't finish, they get to work on it throughout the week. And then Friday, we try to catch up on everything. So it's like finishing Friday, where you finish your work that you didn't get to finish throughout the week. That is what desk work looks like in math. And for technology, they're on their Chromebooks doing iStation Reading or iStation Math. I also pay for education.com, the premium account, because it has Brainzy Education, which is a learning path. So I also have my students set up on that. If they finish like their game or their seat work quickly, instead of getting on iStation, I let them get on Brainzy or get Epic, depending on what subject it is. So those are other options for my technology center. For the back table, because I'm a center as well, so during reading, it's guided reading. I don't really like the books that we have at our school, because, especially for my students that are working on decoding, because it's not allowing them to practice those skills. It's just a lot of guessing and looking at the pictures and repetitive sentences. So I usually just either create a decodable passage, or I find a decodable book online and use that at the back table for my lower groups. And for my higher groups, the higher you go, the longer the books get. So I usually just pull off a passage off of ReadWorks that focuses on like a phonics skill that we've been learning, or a grammar skill, and focuses on our literary or informational skill that we're talking about. And then I print off the questions that go with it. So we use that same passage for like weeks. And during math at my back table, I'm usually doing the current standard or spiral review. Like if I notice that in our weekly assessment, like a lot of them struggled with adding and subtracting with regrouping, we're still doing that. Even though that's not our current standard, we're working on measurement at my back table. That's what we're working on, because all of my students are struggling with that. We're also still working on 100 more, 100 less, 10 more, 10 less, especially with those 3-digit numbers. That's tricky for them. So we're still working on that, even though that was our last unit. We're still working on that at the back table, because for the majority of my students get measurement. Measurement is not difficult for them. So because they're grasping measurement easily, I'm using that time during at my back table to hit those standards that we're still struggling with, which is adding, subtracting with regrouping, and 10 more, 10 less. So before I flip the camera around and show you what's inside of in each drawer, I'll probably do a separate video for like how I teach my small groups and how I store that. That'll be like a different video. And if you have any questions, or if something doesn't make sense and you need some clarification, please don't hesitate to ask, or drop a question down below. Also, a lot of the resources that I share, not a lot of them, but most of the resources that I share, I create and sell them in my Teachers Pay Teacher store. I'll link some of the ones that I'm sharing in this video down below. I also have a Google Drive where I share free resources. So there are a lot of free resources that you can have access to as well. So this is my setup for small group. I color coordinate my subjects. So reading is pink, math is blue, and I can talk more about that in another video. So you only see 3 groups here, but my alligators are towards the end of the shelf. So we're going to look at word work first. Again, this focuses on either a phonics skill or a language skill, depending on the group. So for my llamas, we have mastered our letter sounds, because that's something that we were struggling with. Now that we've mastered our letter sounds, they are reading CVC words. We've been working on decoding and blending, or segmenting and blending. So they're going to read the CVC words, find the matching picture, and match it. And then when they finish, they have a recording sheet where they spell out the words that they matched. Word work for my monkeys, we are mastering beginning blends. So now we're going to be focusing on final blends. So they just match the picture, hold on. So they would just match the picture to the ending blend that they have. So milk, this would be LK, that would be the ending blend. So once they make all their matches, then they have the recording sheet where they're gonna add the ending blends for each picture. This week, my giraffes and alligators did the same center. Even though these are my higher students, we still struggle with sentence structure, like capitalizing our letters and adding punctuation. And then when we took our MAP test, putting the words in a sentence in the correct order was a skill that a lot of my students struggled with, so I made sure that I included that in my word work. So There are 9 different sentences, and they're about like 6 to 7 words in each sentence, and they all have the same picture. So one sentence might be about leaves. So students find the 6 or 7 cards that have leaves on them, and then they put those words in order to create a sentence, and then they write it down on their recording sheet. There is a sentence about football, so they're going to find all the cards that have footballs on them and then put those words in the right order and then copy it down on their paper. So this is what my higher groups are doing this week. I do like to do seasonal activities. It is kind of a lot of work for me if I don't get it prepped during the summer, but it's worth it because my students stay engaged and they get excited, and it just makes it more fun. Like I mentioned earlier, desk work is always focused on the current standard or just a standard that we need to hit again. Something that my students are struggling with are constructive responses and going back in the passage to find evidence to support their answers. So I try to include passages all the time for desk work. For my llamas, they are working on the at family, so theirs look a little different than everybody else's, but they always have to do these prompts first where they have to kind of identify certain words. Then they read it, and then on the back they have these questions that they have to answer. I get support during my reading block, and the support teacher that comes in, he usually monitors my desk work groups and assists them with their reading if they need it. And so he's definitely working with this group during this time. So for my monkeys and giraffes and alligators, they all have seasonal passages that are differentiated. These are from Elementary Nest, and these are her fall passages, and they're differentiated. So they are doing scarecrows. There's an informational one, and then a fictional, and then this group is doing footballs, but they were supposed to do this last week, but they didn't get to it. So usually the passages are the same and they're just differentiated, but they're doing football. And of course there's a informational one and then a fiction, so nonfiction and fiction. And then they just have to go back in the passage and answer these questions. Really, that's just what my students struggle with. It's just practicing reading independently and finding their answers and writing them in complete sentences. So that is what we work on during desk work. As you can see, sometimes the groups get started and then they don't get finished. So if they don't get finished, they can either try to finish on Friday, but if majority of my students are not done with their word work or math games, then they're going to do it again the following week. So sometimes my centers last 2 weeks. Sometimes they just last 1. It just depends. So now we're looking at math games. So for my llamas, we have been working on number identification. Now that we're doing better with identifying numbers, we are working on numeracy, or like number order. So what number comes next? So they're going to use a dry erase marker to add the missing number, and then they go to their recording sheet and write their answer with pencil. This is part of a first grade fall math centers. This is part of first grade fall phonics centers. This is my second grade fall phonics centers, as well as this one, second grade fall phonics centers. So yeah, I love that I have first and second because it allows me to easily differentiate. So that's what llamas are doing. Everybody else is working on measurement independently. Because measurement seems pretty simple and my students grasp it, I use this time to really try to reinforce skills that my students are missing, like number identification and before and after, or number order. These students need to practice that. So they are, even though the standard is measurement, this is what they're working on during math games. And then they'll get the opportunity to practice measurement with their seat work. So for the rest of my groups, my monkeys, giraffes, and alligators, they are all doing these measurement task cards where they have a ruler. They measure each image on the task cards. There's 12 of them, and then they write their answers on their recording sheet. And I don't make several copies of one activity. I just transfer it from drawer to drawer. So tomorrow, my monkeys are going to this group, to this center, so that's why the cards are in here. But like yesterday, the cards were in here. Because they were the group that went to it first, and I just transfer my rulers down too. And like I said, seat work is always pretty much the same. Sometimes I really differentiate in reading. Sometimes I differentiate in math, and sometimes I don't. If I do differentiate, it's usually the last page, but I want to be able to see what my students can do on grade level. And this is also good for me to keep within their student files so that I can pull it out during conference time and see like, this is how your student's performing with grade level standards. So like I mentioned earlier, we are working on measurement. So that's what the seat work focuses on. I'm going to show you a group that hasn't come to this yet. So we're learning about measurement. So this first page just gives them a measurement and they have to find it on the ruler and draw a line and they color it in. And the students have to pay attention to the unit of measurement. A lot of times they just want to look at inches, but I've added centimeters in there too so they can practice identifying or differentiating between the two units. The back page allows them to measure different lines, and then they have to write their answers in these little rectangles. There are 9 of those, so they're practicing measuring with a ruler. And then, like I said, addition and subtraction with regrouping is such a tricky skill for my students to learn. So we are still learning that at the back table. We're still practicing it during center time, independent groups. So I try to add a spiral review page to the back. So the first page is usually focused on the current standard, and then the back page is usually focused on spiral review and whatever we're doing at the back table. So all of them are doing those. So yeah, these are the rest of my drawers. I have a writing drawer, and then I have social studies, but we teach social studies on and off. So social studies is this week, and then next week it's science, so I just change out the sign. But here are the drawers for my alligator group. So yeah. As I was recording me going through my drawers, I was on my knees and my ankles hurt from doing that. This just lets me know how old I'm getting. Okay, so like I said, I'll probably do a separate video for what my small group looks like and how I store the centers or the activities that we do at my small group table. If you have any questions, please let me know by dropping them down below, or again, you can message me on Instagram, TikTok. I'll link my accounts down below, or you can send me an email. I'll also link the resources that I shared. I'll share a link to my free resources in my Google Drive. I hope I was able to answer a lot of questions. I have anxiety thinking that there's a question that I didn't answer. That's why I tried to make notes, but I'm also ready to go home. So if I didn't answer them, I'll just make another video. I really want to start posting more on YouTube. I just have to figure out like what that looks like for me. If you have any other things that you want to see me share, just let me know and I will try to record a video for that. But thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.